There are several wide receivers that you need to keep an eye on during this NFL preseason. We'll tell you who they are in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her at Yahoo Fantasy. And guys, football is back. We officially have a preseason game tonight. I can't wait, although it's probably going to be a lot of players that you never heard of. But on today's show, we're going to be talking about several wide receivers that you need to keep an eye on during the duration of the preseason. Kate, let's start with the Los Angeles Chargers, because I think of all the wide receiver cores in the NFL, this one is probably the most up in the air.
Yeah, the doors kind of feel wide open. Now, let's just do a summary of the offseason, right? There was a lot of departures. The Los Angeles Chargers traded away Keenan Allen, who has been the absolute target hog for this offense. They let Austin Eckler in free agency walk away. Don't look back. They wanted him in kind of a workhorse role, it sounds like, and he wanted a more of a complimentary role at this point in his career. But there's no doubt that he has been a central part of this Chargers passing attack. You move on from Mike Williams, who, when healthy, has been a big asset in this offense. Gerald Everett goes to the Chicago Bears. There was a mass exodus of pass catchers here. So what did they do? Not much. Not much at all. They drafted Ladd McConkey early in the second round, who was a guy that we very much liked in the pre-draft process. But other than that, they signed DJ Chark in free agency. Flashy speedster, but struggles to stay healthy. So we're left with this Chargers receiving core of what is essentially Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, former first-round pick of the 2023 class, Josh Palmer, and DJ Chark. Now, I just want to roll through the ranks here and let's give our predictions for this wide receiver core, because I do think that none of these guys really have proven enough, I think, to kind of get slated out of the preseason. So I do think we're going to get to see this Chargers receiving core and how they operate together, in what lineups, when, what situations. I think we're actually going to be able to learn probably more from the Chargers receiving core than anybody else this year. So let's hear your predictions for this group of misfit toys.
Well, first of all, the only one that I want to have in my dynasty teams or my redraft teams is Ladd McConkey. But I actually don't think we're going to see him a lot in the preseason, Kate, because he was somebody that was dealing with an injury during his final year at Georgia. And I think he's going to have such a big role that they're probably going to be pretty careful about how they use him. I do think we're going to see a lot of Quentin Johnston. I don't think we'll see a lot of Josh Palmer. And frankly, I don't think we're going to see a lot of DJ Chark either, because he's a veteran. I think we're going to see a lot of guys like Simi Fehoko and Demarius Davis.
You don't think we're going to see Quentin Johnston?
You don't think so?
Oh, sorry. I thought you said we wouldn't.
No, I don't. I think we will see lots of Quentin Johnston. I don't think we'll see lots of Josh Palmer, because
I think that's fair.
I think we kind of know what Josh Palmer is at this point. Same with DJ Chark. Darius Davis, who's really more of a kick returner, I think we'll see some of. Brendan Rice, who they drafted in the 7th round, will probably play a lot. To me, it is Johnson. Johnson's the guy that I want to see. How does he look in year 2? This is a brand new offense. And more so even how he looks. Kate, I want to see where he's playing. Is he lining up as an X receiver? Because if that's the case, totally out. Totally out on Quentin Johnston. But if he's playing more slot snaps, that's when I might be able to be talked back into Quentin Johnston.
Even if it's not a full-time slot role, because like Lad McConkey, he can also I think Lad McConkey can play more on the outside than people give him credit for. But like Lad McConkey, you're gonna expect that they're gonna utilize his athleticism out of the slot. Quentin Johnston, though, I just want to see him moving around the formation. It's not necessarily just that, I think he needs to play a full-time slot role, but I want to see them, generate some touches for him, get him some easy layups, get him in the slot, get him into this like, pseudo power slot role. Cause I don't think he's a full-time outside receiver.
No, he's not. I mean, we saw that last year. Like if he's having to play on the outside, it's curtains for Quentin Johnston. But I do think this is a very interesting wide receiver core because it's almost like, again, this is not a Cowboys show, but it's almost like the Cowboys backfield in the sense where there's nobody at the top. So you could have somebody that's currently RB3, RB4, or RB5 on your depth chart suddenly win the job, and now that's one of the most valuable players in all of fantasy, right? I could see the same thing happening for the Chargers because they're attached to Justin Herbert and there's no clear number one in this passing attack. What if, again, make up in it, what if DJ Chark finally stays healthy and he's the deep threat that Justin Herbert has always wanted, and all of a sudden he looks awesome in the preseason, and now he's the guy that's getting 7, 8, 9 targets a game early on in September. It's why I am so curious to see this wide receiver core in the preseason because I think anything could realistically happen here.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And even looking at like a guy like Josh Palmer, who this year missed some time, but in the last full season he played, full-ish, he missed one game in 2022. He had, just under almost 800 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. And that was like really playing this sort of tertiary role. He also has more of that prototypical size that you're looking for in an outside wide receiver, just over 6'1", 210 pounds. Not like a great athlete, but, I think passable, especially when you consider, some of the size that he has to offer. Like he's not Lad McConkey, but he does offer some more size and maybe a little bit more physicality. So like Josh Palmer could be intriguing. So like if you have to take a shot, so Marcus, I'm going to pull up these average draft positions for these Chargers wide receiver. Lad McConkey being drafted in the 5th round, wide receiver 33. Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer being drafted back-to-back, wide receivers 65 and 66, both in the 12th round. And then DJ Chark is undrafted. So like, how would you prioritize these guys if you were just taking, because Lad McConkey, we already know we're drafting Lad McConkey. We love Lad McConkey. Leave him out of the conversation. How do you prioritize the rest of these receiving core in terms of like, if you have to take a dart throw?
Well, let's do like the process of elimination. It's probably not Josh Palmer, just because I think we already know what Josh Palmer is. I think he's a solid number 3 NFL receiver that just doesn't have a lot of
upside. The most targeted player remaining from the previous regime. So like from a chemistry standpoint, Justin Herbert knows Josh Palmer better than anybody else in this team, which is interesting.
It's true. I'm not interested.
Okay.
DJ Chark, I would have like DJ Chark on my waiver wire speed dial just because I still kind of believe in his talent, but I'm not drafting him, obviously. And that gets me back to Quentin Johnston at wide receiver 65 in the 12th round. I don't love it, but I could be talked into it because you are buying somebody who was a former first round pick. Jim Harbaugh said a lot of positive things about him so far this offseason. I think if I'm on the clock in round 12 and I see his name there, I probably pass, but I at least think about it for a good 30 seconds.
I mean, 30 seconds.
Well, it depends how quick my draft is. If it's a 60-second draft, I can't think about it too long.
I wouldn't advise thinking about Quentin Johnston all that long, but he's intriguing. And I think what we kind of do lose with Quentin Johnston, there was a ton of hype last season coming out of TCU. People were very excited. People were excited about the draft capital, the total upside. But I do think it's kind of interesting that like, I never thought that Quentin Johnston was a finished product coming out of TCU. He was big. he was a good athlete for his size. And then like he needed to learn, I think, more of the wide receiver position. I think he needed to figure out where his natural position is on the field. And I don't know that like either of those things were accomplished in his rookie season, but like we kind of valued him as a guy that was going to be more polished than he was. So I don't know that like we seemed really surprised when he wasn't the polished dude that he was never billed to be. So like maybe we are being too quick to dismiss Quentin Johnston. He has again that draft capital. That's not a guarantee, but like I don't think you should sell him, you know?
No, I'm just not excited about this Chargers wide receiver core at all. There you go. That's my thoughts. That's why the preseason is so important, because maybe somebody will break out and surprise us here. So keep an eye on the LA wide receivers during the preseason. All right, let's move on to a different team in the AFC West, the Denver Broncos. Let's talk about Troy Franklin next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier than ever before. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer that it gets to first pitch. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events near you, and save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. And get this, you can save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime pick your exact seats. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kate, let's switch over to the Denver Broncos in the AFC West. They're another team that has a very interesting wide receiver core. They just redid Courtland Sutton's deal. We know he'll be there, but everybody else after him, they're fighting for snaps and they're fighting for targets. Who are you interested in watching in this group?
I want to see Troy Franklin, who, a guy that coming out of this draft class, I think most people were pretty surprised to see him fall to the fourth round. Now, when he was at Oregon, he was an absolute superstar, right? He did what he was asked to do to perfection. It's why he was as productive in his final season. But in the scouting process, we acknowledge that there were some deficiencies. And what I'm really interested to see is, I want to shout out right now. There was a question that a Twitter user had asked Broncos insider Benjamin Albright on Twitter. He said, "Is Troy Franklin showing early promise?" Which I think is like a pretty easy layup, right? That's a easy. Yeah, he shows flashes, right? Like I feel like there's a really easy way to answer that question positively if you feel like the play has generally been good. Albright's response to that was, "I don't really know how to answer this. He's been coached pretty vocally and pretty hard out there. You see flashes here and there, but I don't think he's likely to be starting, let alone be a big part of the plan this year. Sutton, Mims, and Josh Reynolds are probably the starters, with Tim Patrick being the first man off the bench." So like right now, off the bat, this Broncos insider thinks he's wide receiver 5. And you look at the scouting report for him, Marcus. Can we go back to what we were originally scouting in the pre-draft process. Like, give us a rundown of Troy Franklin coming out.
Yeah, he's a receiver that had good size, but really good speed, made a lot of plays down the field. I thought he did an excellent job of tracking the football. In a lot of ways, he reminded me of Jalen Hyatt coming out of Tennessee back in the 2023 draft. Uber productive, not a lot of wasted movement in his game, just a very efficient downfield receiver. The problem with Troy Franklin is it's a very limited route tree, just like we saw from Jalen Hyatt. Not a lot of experience against press coverage. Oregon had him spread way out where the safeties couldn't get to them. You had the corners would give him 10, 15 yards of cushion because of his speed. And he's just not, I mean, he's got good size, but he doesn't play strong. You see some corners in the Pac-12 last year were able to bully him a little bit and get him off the route when he actually played a quality corner. And he's a very linear athlete, right? He's not somebody who you're going to throw a slant and he's going to make multiple moves and get up the field. What he's going to do, he's a long strider that makes plays down the field. I think a good NFL comparison for him would be like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who, good player for the Packers, good player for the Chiefs, helped, made a lot of big plays for them, but not somebody that you consistently build your offense around. And I think that's where we're at with Troy Franklin. Like, he just needs a lot of work with his route running. And that's just to do the simple part of his games, to run the 9 routes, to run the post routes. It wouldn't surprise me if he has a red shirt type of season.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And going back to, just again, kind of thinking, what was he like as a prospect? What were the issues? What were the points of problems with his game? Again, I think Jalen Hyatt is a pretty interesting comparison here because you look at what Jalen Hyatt did in Tennessee's system, right? And he excelled at what he did in Tennessee's system, but what he's asked to do in Tennessee is not what's going to be asked to do of him in NFL offense. And I think that's kind of a great comparison for Troy Franklin in that he has physical tools and, mentioned the lack of play strength there. He's only 176 pounds. So he's got some, meat that's left on the bones. He's 6'2", 176 pounds. Again, kind of the ability to stretch the field when you're a little bit lengthier is always impressive, but he is going to need to, I think, bulk up a little bit. That's going to take some time, grow into his body a little bit more. And then you have to make sure that he can maintain the speed element of his game, which is so critical to what he does. If he does put on a little bit of muscle and a little bit of added weight, which I think he needs to. I got kind of excited when they paired Troy Franklin with his college quarterback, but
as you should. Yeah.
I think I got a little bit enamored with that potential because we know how important chemistry can be, but if he can't earn his way onto the field, then the chemistry doesn't matter because the coaching staff will decide when he is on and off the field. And he's going to have to take some literal big strides in order to earn those snaps.
But this is why the preseason is important for Troy Franklin, right? If he just comes in and he lights it up and he's making multiple big catches down the field, maybe the Broncos are more open to finding ways to get him on the field as a rookie, right? But if he's struggling, he can't get off press coverage, and he's posting stat lines of 2 catches for 9 yards, and it's just clear that he is years away from becoming an impact player, that's when I'm going to get concerned. But there is an opportunity here for him to have a fantastic August and maybe surpass a Marvin Mims on the depth chart, right? It's not inconceivable that he could just get a lot better once the games start happening. So I'm very, very intrigued by Troy Franklin. But Kate, do you know who I'm more intrigued by? That's Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys. I will tell you why next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. There's nothing better than at the end of a long day, sitting on my couch, turning on the TV and seeing what sports games are on. But unfortunately, with the NBA playoffs over and the NHL playoffs over, we just have fewer and fewer games to watch, and the sports aren't sporting the way that I'd like them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to fanduel.com and start making the most out of your summer with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Everydayers, on Friday's show, we're going to take a look at 3 tight ends that you need to keep an eye on during the NFL preseason, so be on the lookout for that. But Kate, let's finish up here with Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys.
I'm going to need you to sell me on this, Marcus. When we were outlining today's show, you threw Jalen Tolbert into this mix. And I got to say, this was one name that I was not expecting to be watching in the preseason, but you were pretty enthusiastic. So can you please sell me and our listeners on why Jalen Tolbert is a player to watch? Because I even said, Marcus, is this you being a Cowboys fan? Are you being a homer? Or do you actually think this guy could have some dynasty value? And you said both.
Both.
Lay it out.
Let's start with the situation, right? I think this is Mike McCarthy is going into the final year of his contract. Dak Prescott is going into the final year of his contract. McCarthy has been known as somebody who wants to air it out when it comes to the football, right? Like he wants to throw the football. You look at their pass rates over the final 14 games of the season last year. Basically, once they refigured the offense, I mean, they were like top in the NFL in passing attempts. And that was with Tony Pollard in the backfield. Now it's Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle, and Royce Freeman. Like they're going to throw the football. Like there's no doubt. And Dak Prescott, whatever you think about Dak, he is good enough to support multiple receivers and a tight end in the passing game, right? CeeDee Lamb still does not have a deal. He is holding out from Dallas camp. So that has allowed Jalen Tolbert to become the de facto number 1 receiver in this offense. Brandon Cooks is playing a complementary role. Jake Ferguson is installed, obviously, as the tight end 1. And Jalen Tolbert has been awesome in training camp. Absolutely awesome. He's moving all around the field. He's playing in the slot. The confidence is there. You just see he's a totally different player this year. And he's one that Dak Prescott absolutely trusts. And if the Cowboys are going to be top 5 in passing attempts this season, and you have somebody like Dak who is pretty, again, whatever you think of Dak, pretty efficient as a passer year over year, we're suddenly looking at Jalen Tolbert being a realistic fantasy option. And remember, no Michael Gallup, who was the starting receiver for most of last year. Brandon Cooks is getting older. We are one CeeDee Lamb sprained ankle away from Jalen Tolbert getting double-digit targets every single game. And he is so cheap right now that I can't stop buying him.
Okay, you've made a pretty good case, I actually have to say, because I was very skeptical coming into the situation. Now, coming out, 2022 draft has the 3rd round draft capital, not like super high, but like not so bad. But like, can you just share with the listeners, like what archetype wide receiver are we looking at for Jalen Tolbert? Because like, I don't think we're looking at like a possession guy. Like what type of production could we look at realistically if he earns a consistent role in this offense?
He is very much of these inside-outside receivers that I think plays better in the slot. And that's tricky because CeeDee Lamb does really well in the slot, but somebody who is good in the middle of the field because he's very wiry, he's got really strong hands, and he's got a big catch radius. But the Cowboys really like his route running. Now, they're not going to throw him deep balls down the sideline or anything like that, but he is somebody that can run some of these over routes and slants and just get the volume. Not great after the catch, but I do think he could gobble up a lot of targets in this offense, especially if Dak is throwing the ball 35, 40 times a game.
And I do think you do make a good point about the trajectory of this offense, right? We're projecting kind of this inefficient run game. I think they're going to have to pass the ball. And I do think that this team might be incentivized to, see what in the world they've got in Jalen Tolbert. He's heading into his third year. We know third year can be kind of a magic breakout year. And you do have Brandon Cooks in the final year of his contract. Now, you mentioned they play kind of different roles within the offense, but I do think in terms of figuring out the trajectory of this passing game, they've got a lot of big decisions coming up. You've got the contract Dak Prescott. There are a lot of moving pieces, but if you can figure out the Tolbert component and maybe save some money there, if you can start to utilize him as this outside weapon, cool. That's a problem we've solved for the next 2 seasons, right? Like, they do have some incentive to see what they've got in Jalen Tolbert, and these reps missing out on CeeDee Lamb's absence. Like, that's provided them a pretty crucial opportunity to evaluate Jalen Tolbert and for him to win his way into this offense that he didn't have before.
And I do think he's going to play a lot in the preseason because he's still a young receiver who's developing. So it won't be with Dak because Dak Prescott's just not going to play in the preseason. He hasn't over the last couple of years. It'll be with Cooper Rush with the quote unquote first team. But I'm really curious to see where Jalen Tolbert's lining up. The Cowboys are changing their offense a little bit rather than having 2 outside receivers and a slot receiver. They're going to more of these condensed formations like the Rams have, where you almost have 2 slot receivers on the field at the same time. They're lined up so close to the tackles.
That
So
could
I
be
want to see
perfect for CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert to both get those opportunities.
Correct. And Brandon Cooks is the outside guy because he has the speed to stretch the field, just like he did when he was with the Rams several years ago. So I'm really excited to see Tolbert. I want to see him in the preseason. I want to see how the Cowboys are using him. He's not somebody that is going to change your outcome in your fantasy leagues or anything like that. But I do think he's somebody that you can acquire pretty cheaply or pretty cheap right now, who might be able to give you some solid flex play, week in and week out because of the target volume and because of the efficiency.
Yeah, wide receiver 89 in terms of dynasty startup ADP. And I do think there's like a reasonable case where maybe Jalen Tolbert is a guy that is kind of just thrown into a deal for you. Like, you're making a trade with the Jalen Tolbert manager,
Yes.
and you're playing some hardball. Say, throw in Jalen Tolbert and we've got a deal. Some recent trades, and I say recent, they're in the last couple of months, but I think the value still stands because there's not really been much that's changed with Jalen Tolbert. Jalen Tolbert in exchange for 12 blind bidding dollars.
I mean, my goodness.
Come on. Like, that's free. That's free Tolbert.
And that's the point right now. If Jalen Tolbert has a really big preseason, which, by the way, all the Cowboys games are being broadcast on NFL Network, so everybody will see them live. If he has a big preseason, you're not going to be able to get him for 12 waiver wire dollars. Cowboy players are always a little overrated when it comes to fantasy value, dynasty value. I do think he is somebody that you might want to just go out and see if you can get him now before the preseason begins.
Love that.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. You can follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. You can also read her at Yahoo Fantasy. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy the Hall of Fame game, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.